I remember the day she stepped off that wagon like it was yesterday. The sun was hanging low over Dry Ridge, burning the sky in shades of brass and smoke, and every breath of wind carried a taste of grit. I've been waiting outside the post office, hat tipped low, boots planted in the dust. Folks said my mail order bride was due on the noon stage, and truth be told, I didn't know what kind of woman would come all this way to marry a man like me. When the wagon rolled up, the driver cracked the reins, and the horses stopped with a tired snort. The door creaked open, and she stepped down, holding her skirts like they were something borrowed from a better life. She was small, pale from travel, with eyes that didn't seem to land anywhere for long. Fear, that's what I saw first. Pure and quiet, sitting behind those gray-blue eyes like a secret she wasn't ready to share. I touched the brim of my hat and said, "Afternoon, ma'am. You must be Miss Amanda Bale Grant." She gave a little nod, her fingers clutching a worn leather satchel. No smile, no words. Just that look, half ready to run. I tried to lighten the air, maybe too quick. "Don't you worry, darling, I don't bite, unless you ask." The moment the words left my mouth, I knew they were wrong. She stiffened, like a wild colt hearing the snap of a whip. I stepped back, hands raised a little, trying to show her I meant no harm. "I'm sorry," I said soft. "That was a fool's joke. You've had a long ride. Let's get you some shade." She followed me to the wagon without saying much. The hem of her dress brushed the dirt, and I noticed how careful her steps were, like she was walking on thin ice. I loaded her trunk, what little she owned, and we rode out toward my place. 15 miles of red dust and heat that made the air shimmer. Neither of us spoke much on that ride. The horses' hooves made the only rhythm, steady and dull, and every now and then I'd glance over. She sat straight as a fence post, hands folded tight in her lap. The closer we got to the ranch, the quieter the world felt. Even the cicadas had gone still. When we finally reached the house, the light was starting to fade. I built that cabin myself, timber rough-hewn, roof patched twice over, porch boards that creaked under every step. It wasn't much, but it stood solid, and I hoped she'd see that. I climbed down first, tied the reins, then turned to help her. She hesitated before taking my hand. Her palm was cold, dry as paper. When her boots touched the dirt, she pulled back quick, like even the ground might hurt her. "This here's home," I said quietly. "Ain't grand, but it keeps the rain out. There's a key on the inside of your door if you ever need it. Always lock it if that makes you feel right." She looked at me then, really looked. Not long, but enough for me to see that she was studying my words, weighing them like a man's worth could be measured in promises. Inside, I showed her the small kitchen, the hearth, and the extra room I'd fixed up, the one meant for her. The walls smelled faintly of cedar, and on the bed I'd laid a clean blanket, thick wool, gray with a bit of red weave at the edge. I'd spent a whole evening stitching the tier myself. It wasn't pretty, but it was honest work. "You can rest here, Tobias," I said. "Water's by the basin. I'll stay out of your way." She nodded again. Still no words. I started to back out when she whispered, almost too quiet to catch, "Thank you." It stopped me in my tracks. Just that one phrase, but it sounded like the first plank laid on a bridge between two strangers. Later that night, I sat out on the porch, letting the cool wind wash the heat off my skin. Through the thin wall, I could hear the creak of her bed frame, the restless sound of a woman fighting ghosts in her sleep. I left a cup of water outside her door and an extra blanket folded neat. Didn't knock, just set it there. Around midnight, I heard her footsteps, soft, cautious. The door opened, then shut again. A moment later, I heard the faint rustle of wool. Maybe she took the blanket. I hope she did. When dawn came, the light spilled across the land like melted gold. I brewed coffee, strong and black, and baked cornbread on the stove. She stepped into the kitchen just as the smell filled the room. Her hair was down now, loose and tangled from sleep, and for the first time she looked less like a shadow. "Morning," I said, keeping my tone easy. "There's coffee if you like some." She hesitated, then took the tin cup I offered. Her hands shook a little. She sipped slow, eyes fixed on the steam. "It's good," she murmured. "Glad to hear it," I said, watching the way the color crept back into her cheeks. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the scent of dry sage. I told her I'd be working the fence that morning, and she could rest or unpack. She nodded, still quiet, but I caught a small thing, a spark of calm in the way she breathed. Before I stepped out, she spoke again, voice barely above a whisper. "You don't have to be kind, Mr. Langston." I turned, meeting her eyes. "Ain't something I force, ma'am. Just comes natural when someone's scared." That was the start of it, though I didn't know then what kind of storm had followed her here. All I knew was that the woman sitting in my kitchen looked like she'd walked through fire, and somehow she was still standing. I reckon that's where our story truly began. The days that followed were quiet, the kind of quiet that feels heavy, like the air's listening. Amanda hardly spoke, but she moved through the house, soft as a prayer. I'd catch glimpses of her through the doorway, folding linens, sweeping dust from the floorboards, staring out across the plains like she was waiting for something that never came. I tried not to crowd her. Lord knows a woman needs room to breathe, especially one who's run from something. I've been around enough horses to know you don't reach for a skittish one too quick. You just stand near, calm and steady, till they start to trust the sound of your breath. Each morning, I'd leave her a bit of cornbread and coffee before heading out to mend the fence or check the cattle. When I came back, the cup would be washed, the plate set upside down on the counter. Not a word said, but it was her way of answering. One afternoon, I found her sitting on the porch steps, watching the sky turn the color of buttermilk and fire. In her lap was a small notebook, the cover worn smooth. She didn't notice me at first. The wind played with a loose strand of her hair, and for a moment she looked peaceful, like the land itself had lent her a bit of quiet. "You writing something?" I asked, keeping my voice low. She startled, clutching the book close. "Just notes," she said in Vama. "For myself." I nodded. "Ain't no harm in that." She gave a small smile, the first I'd seen. "Do you write, Mr. Langston?" "Not much worth reading," I said. "I jot down fence repairs, weather, what the herd's doing. Ain't the poetic kind." "Maybe you are," she said, eyes on the horizon. "You just don't know it." That stuck with me longer than I cared to admit. A few nights later, a storm rolled in from the east, the kind that makes the windows hum and the roof complain. I was sitting by the hearth, mending a bridle, when lightning split the sky. Amanda flinched hard, dropping the plate she'd been drying. It shattered against the floor, and before I could speak she was pressed against the wall, hands over her ears, breath coming fast. I stood there a second, not wanting to make it worse. Then I set the bridle down and spoke soft. "It's just a storm, Amanda. Nothing to fear." Her eyes were wide, wild almost. "Fire," she whispered. "It always starts with thunder." That's when I saw it, the faint scar peeking from beneath her sleeve, a burn that ran along her wrist. She realized I'd seen and turned away, pulling the fabric down. I crouched by the broken plate, gathering the pieces slow. "I'll take care of this," I said. "You sit." She shook her head, still trembling. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." "Ain't nothing to be sorry for, child," I said. "Storms can sound meaner than they are." When the thunder rolled again, she closed her eyes tight. Without thinking, I reached for the old wool blanket from the chair and laid it over her shoulders. She stiffened. Then after a breath, she held it close. We sat there a while, not speaking. The storm raged. The fire cracked, and I could feel the heat licking at my boots. She didn't move till the thunder finally faded into a far-off grumble. Later that night, after she'd gone to bed, I couldn't shake the image of her pressed against that wall, fear like a shadow crawling over her. I'd seen men break in war, seen what noise and smoke can do to the mind. Whatever had happened to her, it left a mark deeper than skin. The next morning, I rode out early to the ridge, where the soil ran black from an old fire years back. The grass had started growing again, stubborn little blades fighting through ash. I knelt there a while, thinking about her, about how some things take time to come back green. When I returned, she was in the garden patch beside the house, hands in the dirt, sleeves rolled up. She looked up when she heard the horse. "I thought I'd try planting something," she said. "Your mother's chrysanthemums. They were in that tin box you keep by the window." Those were my mother's seeds, ones I hadn't touched since she passed. For a second, I didn't know what to say. "They might take," I said finally. "Soil's rough, but it's honest." She smiled, small but real. "Then we'll see if they're as stubborn as we are." That afternoon, I worked on the shed roof while she tended the little patch of earth. The air smelled of rain and turned soil. Every time I glanced down, I saw her kneeling there, careful, patient, talking to those flowers like they could hear her. As the sun dipped low, she brought me a cup of coffee, same as I'd done for her that first morning. It wasn't perfect, too weak, a little bitter, but I drank every drop. "Thank you," I said. "You're welcome," she replied, and her voice had that steady ring of someone remembering what it felt like to be useful. That night, as I lay awake listening to the crickets sing, I thought about how strange it was. Two broken lives trying to build something whole out here where no one else cared to look. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but I knew this much. I wanted her to stay, and maybe, just maybe, she was starting to want the same. By the third week, I'd grown used to the sound of her moving around the house, the soft thud of her steps on the wooden floor, the whisper of fabric as she worked at the table. It was strange how silence could turn into company once you started listening close enough. She didn't speak much, but her presence had a way of filling the rooms, gentle, steady, like the hum of the windmill on a calm day. I'd find small things she'd done while I was out riding. A mended curtain, a clean dish, my boots left by the door instead of where I'd kicked them off. She never said she was trying to make the place feel like home, but somehow it started to. One evening, I came in from the field late. The sky was still pink at the edges, that soft kind of light that makes the dust hang gold in the air. She was sitting by the table, writing in that same little notebook. I didn't mean to read it, but I caught a glimpse of her hand scrawling across the page. Some things grow better in quiet. When she noticed me watching, she shut the book fast, eyes darting away. I just nodded toward it. "Ain't my business," I said. "You write all you need. Some things make more sense on paper." That earned me the faintest smile. Then she asked, "Do you ever get lonely out here, Wade?" I thought about that. The long days, the nights filled with nothing but coyotes and wind. "Used to," I said. "Then I learned to live with it. Guess I thought that's just how life was meant to be." She looked down at her hands. "And now?" I rubbed my thumb along the rim of my cup. "Now I ain't so sure." She didn't say a word, but I could feel something shift in the air, like we both realized how close silence can sit beside comfort. The next morning, I saddled the horse to head into town for supplies. She came out to the porch, her hair tucked up neat under a shawl. "You'll be back by sundown?" she asked. "That's the plan," I said. "Anything you want me to fetch?" She hesitated and then said, "If they've got sugar, maybe a little. I can make coffee right if I do." I smiled at that. Sugar it is. The ride to Dry Ridge took near half the day, and by the time I got there, the town was already humming. Wagons clattering, kids chasing dogs, dust rising like smoke. I tied my horse outside the general store, picked up flour, nails, sugar. Just as I was leaving, I saw her. Not Amanda, but a man. Tall, thin, with a limp in his left leg. He was talking to the clerk, voice rough, impatient. When he turned, I caught the glint of a brass ring on his finger, scratched and dented. For some reason, it set a chill down my spine. He saw me looking and gave a half smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You the one they call Langston?" he asked. I nodded slow. "That's right. Who's asking?" He spat to the side, the way men do when they're about to lie. "Name's Silas. Heard tell you got yourself a new bride. Mail order from Kansas way." My hand tensed on the bag of flour. "What's it to you?" "Just curious," he said, still smiling. "Used to know a woman like that. Pretty eyes. Scared easy." Before I could answer, the storekeeper called his name, and he turned away, limping toward the door. I watched him go till the dust swallowed him up. The ride back felt longer than usual. Every sound in the brush had me glancing over my shoulder. When I reached the house, the light was already going soft. Amanda was on the porch again, waiting. "You made it back," she said, relief in her voice. "I did," I said, handing her the bag. "Got your sugar." "Thank you," she said, then paused. "Something wrong?" "Just saw a man in town. Said he knew someone from Kansas." Her face went pale, color draining like water from a cracked bowl. "What was his name?" "Silas." She froze, eyes wide. For a long moment she didn't breathe. Then she whispered, "He's not supposed to be here." That's when I knew whatever she'd run from wasn't gone. It was following, riding the same trail, carrying the same dust. I stepped closer, keeping my voice steady. "You tell me what I need to know." She shook her head, tears starting to build. "No, please, I don't want to bring trouble here." "Trouble don't ask permission," I said. "If he's coming, I need to be ready." She turned away, staring out into the wide, dark stretch of land. He won't stop till he finds me. The wind picked up then, howling low through the dry grass. I watched her shoulders tremble under the shawl, and I made a quiet promise right there on that porch. Whatever kind of man Silas was, he wasn't going to hurt her again, not while she carried my name. That night, I loaded my rifle and set it by the door. The fire burned low, throwing long shadows across the room. She slept in the next room, and every time the boards creaked, I was up listening. The prairie outside was wide and empty, but I could feel eyes on the horizon. Some men run from ghosts, some wait for them to arrive. Me, I've never been much good at running. The next day broke quiet, the kind of quiet that makes a man uneasy. The wind had died some time before dawn, and the sky was heavy with that flat, silver light that comes before rain. Amanda moved slow through the morning, her eyes restless, her hands busy with things that didn't need doing. I let her be. Some fears you can't talk a person out of. They have to wear themselves thin before they loosen their grip. I spent the early hours fixing the corral fence, but my mind wasn't on the work. That man's face, Silas, kept riding circles in my head. The way he smiled, the way he said her name without saying it. I'd seen his kind before, not outlaws, not quite. The kind that breaks spirits first, then bones later. When I came back up to the house, Amanda was kneeling in the dirt patch by the chrysanthemums. The first shoots were coming through, thin green lines pushing up from the earth. She looked up as I stopped beside her. "They're taking root," she said softly. I nodded. "They'll hold, long as we keep the ground wet." She brushed the dirt from her palms, eyes glancing toward the horizon. "If he's really here, he'll come at night. He always waited till dark." My jaw tightened. "Then I'll be waiting ash, too." She shook her head. "You don't understand. He doesn't stop, not when he wants something. He'll burn the world to ash to get it." I crouched beside her, voice low and steady. "Then he'll find out what happens when fire meets stone." She looked at me a long moment, and there was something new in her eyes. Not hope, not yet, but trust, starting to bloom in the cracks where fear had lived. That night, the clouds rolled thick, no moon to see by. I sat on the porch, rifle across my knees, listening to the wind run through the dry grass. Amanda's lamp burned dim inside, her shadow moving once or twice across the curtain. Hours passed. Nothing stirred but the coyotes, yipping far off. I reckon I must have dozed, 'cause the next thing I knew, the sound of boots on gravel pulled me up straight. Not the light step of a woman, heavy, sure-footed, mean. "Who's there, Race?" I called out, voice low but clear. A figure stepped out from behind the old wagon. "Easy, friend. Ain't looking for trouble." Silas. Even in the dark, I knew that limp. He stopped a few paces away, the smell of whiskey riding on him like sweat. "Didn't mean to spook you," he said. "Just came to talk." "Talking time's past," I said. "You got business here?" He smiled, teeth flashing in the dim light. "Yeah, you're harboring something that belongs to me." My grip tightened on the rifle. "Ain't no man owns another soul." "That's so." He took another step closer. "You don't know what she done. She burned me out, left me with nothing." "Maybe you earned that." He laughed, a dry, bitter sound. "She tell you that? She's good at twisting stories, that one. Always was." The door creaked behind me, and Amanda's voice trembled from the shadows. "Don't listen to him, Wade." Silas's head snapped up, and that grin turned to something colder. There you are, darling. I moved between them. You best leave. He took another step, hand falling toward his hip. And if I don't... The hammer clicked back, the sound sharp in the still air. Then you'll find out how fast a tired man can still shoot. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then he spat in the dirt, turned his head, and laughed low. Ain't worth dying for, he said. You'll see that soon enough. He limped off into the dark, boots crunching gravel till the night swallowed him. Amanda was shaking when I turned to her. He'll be back, she whispered. I know, I said, but he ain't getting close without going through me first. She looked like she wanted to argue, but her voice broke before she could. I reached out, airful, touching her arm just once. Go on inside, I said. Lock the door. I'll keep watch. She nodded, eyes glistening, and slipped back into the house. I sat there till dawn, rifle laying across my knees, the cold sinking into my bones. The horizon turned pale, and with it came a slow, steady calm, the kind that settles in a man when he knows what he's willing to stand for. When the first light touched the porch, I saw her through the window. She'd fallen asleep sitting by the hearth, the blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Maybe she didn't believe the danger was gone. Hell, neither did I, but for that one quiet moment the house felt like a place that could hold peace, and I decided right then I'd fight to keep it that way. I woke slow that morning, bones heavy from a night half spent with the rifle across my knees, and the other half with thoughts that would not quiet. Sleep never comes easy when you got a man out there with a reason to hate. I made coffee by the dim light and watched the steam rise like some pale ghost. Then I went out to the barn to check the horses. They were restless, tails clacking, ears twitching at every whisper of wind. That set my mind to turning. Amanda moved about the house with that careful rhythm she'd taken on. She hummed soft to herself while scrubbing the pan, a quiet sound I came to like better than any fiddle. There was a look on her face I couldn't quite name, equal parts determination and dread. She'd been rebuilding herself like some little thing planting through ash, and some days it seemed like each new leaf wrenched out a memory that hurt, yet she kept at it. That's how I knew she lasted things most folks wouldn't dream of surviving. I told her I'd be back by noon, but the truth was I'd ride out and see if Silas had left any tracks in the dust. A man like that don't leave town proper for long. He slips in and out, watchful, like a fox taking measure of a barn. I hitched the horse, slung a bit of jerky in my saddle, and took the ridge route. Less chance of passers-by seeing me, more chance of catching the signs nobody else notices. The prairie was flat and broad, the sky vast as a promise. I rode slow, eyes scanning the road, feeling the land the way a man feels a woman's hand, gentle, cautious, respectful. 2 miles out by the old stone marker, I found prints. Not many, but enough. A man's boot, heavy on the right, drag of a limp on the left. Fresh. He'd been there sniffing around like he owned the place. That set my jaw hard. I rode on, mind going over the options like a man weighing tobacco. Confront him in town where there's witnesses. Might make him clever. Follow him and see where he sleeps. Risk leaving Amanda alone. Best plan was simple. Watch, be ready, and keep the woman safe. Simplicity don't always win fights, but it keeps a man from getting himself killed for pride. Back at the house, Amanda was on the porch with her notebook. Sunlight spilled over the pages, and when I stopped, she slid the book closed, like she'd been caught reading someone else's prayers. "Found tracks," I said flat. "He was near the stone marker." Her face didn't flicker with surprise. Instead, she set the notebook down and reached for my hand. Her fingers were steady. "Then we'll make a plan," she said, and for the first time since she stepped off that wagon, I heard steel in her voice. She surprised me then. "Wade, I don't want you to go alone anymore." I wanted to tell her that this was my fight, my duty to keep her safe. Instead, I watched her and saw something like a woman taking herself back piece by piece. "What are you proposing?" I asked. She looked me square and said, "Teach me to aim. Teach me to listen. If he's coming, I don't want to be running from the dark." I almost laughed. The image of her, all gentleness and quiet, with a rifle across her knees, was the kind of thing you see in dreams, not real life. But she was ordinary now, only in ways that mattered. She had a grit that surprised a man. "You sure?" I asked. "As sure as I can be," she said. "I don't want to be afraid when he comes." We spent the midday near the corral. I showed her how to hold the rifle, how to brace her shoulder, how to steady the breath, how to find that little dot that makes a man stop breathing long enough for a bullet to do the speaking. She listened like she'd been learning to read all her life. Her hands shook at first, then not so much. There was a look on her face I'd seen on men before battle, concentration, and a small, fierce light. When the sun tipped low, she set the rifle down and brought me a bowl of stew. "You taught me quick," she said, plain as bread. "Not because you're some kind of teacher, but because you know how to be patient." I nodded. Patience comes with years not noticing. Most folks mistake it for weakness. We ate in the deepening dusk. She spoke more than she had in weeks, telling me about the road between Kansas and here, about a preacher who'd offered last rites to those who could pay, about nights where a wagon wheel was the only lullaby. Her voice got small when she talked to the one who chased her. She never said much about the first fire, just little scraps, like a threadbare coat she'd stitched back together with quiet words. Night fell hard and blue. I kept the lamp low and the door latched tight. I could tell she wanted to say more, to tell me the parts where her voice might tremble. But some things need telling on a day you both can stand up for. I took her hand after supper, felt that cold paper skin, and squeezed it, careful but firm. "Not tonight," I told her. "Rest now." She let me have that. The world outside laughed its sharp laugh with coyotes and distant hounds, but inside, the hearth was warm and the blanket smelled like the mountain air had kissed it. I slept like a man who'd mended a fence, feeling the strength of the work in his arms. Sleep don't always mean peace, though. Dreams come with the lick of old fires and the crack of boards. I woke once to catch her breathing hard beside me, then softer. When morning came, her eyes were clear. She'd practiced with the rifle at dawn, the early light making the metal look like a promise. Days slipped into a strange rhythm. We moved through the chores with a quiet purpose, planting, mending, keeping watch. I taught her to read the sky, to tell the difference between a storm that'll pass and one that'll come with teeth. She taught me how to tie a sweet-smelling bundle of dried chamomile, folding the stems like secrets. We were two halves of a small whole, working to make a shelter that meant more than timber and nails. Still, the tracks at the stone marker kept me awake some nights. I thought on the man himself, and the way he'd smiled like a dog who's had his fill. Men like that ain't easy to scare. They're built on the sort of hunger that don't ease with threats or bullets. If he came back with friends, it'd be worse. If he came alone, I'd give him all the reason in the world to regret it. I kept the rifle near, and I kept the key on the inside of her door. But I also kept a small handkerchief in my pocket, the sort that had belonged to my ma. It smelled faint of lavender and thyme. Sometimes I'd catch Amanda touching it when she thought I wasn't looking. Little things hold a lot of meaning out here. We were getting better at living, piece by careful piece. But out on the prairie, you learn quick that peace is often only a shadow of something bigger, and the wind carries rumors before the trouble arrives. I reckon we were readying ourselves for the next thing, though none of us could know what shape that storm would take. The days came gentle after that, the air cool enough for breath to fog the windows at dawn. The chrysanthemums had grown tall, bright specks of gold and white against the dark soil. Amanda kept them watered, humming under her breath, and I'd stand by the fence some mornings, watching her and thinking how peace looked better on her than fear ever did. But I never laid my rifle far from reach. The ridge stayed quiet, too quiet, and I have lived long enough to know that when the land goes still, it's listening for something. One evening, she called me in for supper. The table was set with stew and bread, the lamp glowing soft between us. She'd been talking more lately, telling me bits of her past in fragments like torn pages stitched together. I never pressed, just listened. A man learns more that way. That night, she said his name first. Silas. The word left her lips like poison she'd been trying to spit out for years. She told me about the night she ran, how the fire took the barn first, how the smell of smoke and pitch had chased her down the road, how he'd stood there, drunk and laughing, calling her name while the flames clawed at the sky. I didn't mean for him to live, she said, voice barely a whisper. I thought I left him buried in that fire. The lamp crackled, throwing light and shadow across her face. She wouldn't look at me. You ain't the one who needs forgiving, I said. You did what you had to. She shook her head slow. Every night I hear it, the fire, his laugh. Sometimes I think he's already burned me in all this. She waved at the cabin, the land, the stars beyond the window. It's just the part that hasn't caught up yet. I reached across the table, my hand covering hers. You're here, Amanda. He's just a man. He bleeds like one, and he can be stopped like one. She looked at me then, eyes wet and fierce. And what if stopping him burns us too? I didn't answer right away. Outside, the wind had started to rise, tapping the shutters. I let the silence stretch till it settled in the room like smoke. Then we'll burn together, I said finally, but it'll be our fire, not his. She didn't speak again that night, but before she went to bed, she left her door open for the first time. Just a crack, but enough to catch the flicker of her lamp from where I sat. That tiny strip of light kept me awake longer than the wind. The next few days passed in a blur of chores and watching. We worked side by side, fixing the roof, hauling water, bringing in what little crop we'd managed to coax from the dry soil. Amanda had found a kind of strength that wasn't loud, but sure. Every time she lifted a bucket or steadied the ladder, I could see it. Life returning to her limbs, one muscle at a time. Late one afternoon, we were in the field when the sky turned strange. The air shifted. The kind of shift that makes animals restless. The sun dropped behind a wall of copper clouds, and the wind came sudden, carrying that old smell, smoke. Amanda froze, the bucket falling from her hands. "Wade," she whispered, "do you smell it?" I did. I'm not the sweet smoke of a chimney, but the harsh kind, wood and oil. I looked toward the east ridge and saw it, thin gray ribbon curling against the sky. "Stay here," I said, grabbing the rifle, but she shook her head. "No, not again." We rode out together, horses pounding the dry ground. As we neared the ridge, the smell grew thicker, meaner. My gut turned heavy when I saw the source. The old Miller barn, half collapsed, flames licking through the roof. "Lord," I muttered, "ain't been lightning in days." We dismounted. I tossed her the canteen. "Keep back." She didn't listen. While I fought to kick the barn doors open, she ran to the side, calling for the Millers. I caught sight of her through the haze, moving like a ghost through smoke. Then I saw him, Silas, standing near the tree line, hat low, arms crossed, watching. Our eyes met across the distance, the firelight painting him red. He smiled, slow, cruel, and turned away into the dark. By the time the flames died, there was nothing left but black timber and sparks floating in the wind. The Millers were safe. They'd been gone since dawn. But Amanda, she was shaking. Soot streaked across her face, tears carving lines through it. "He's close," she said. "He wants me to see." I pulled her close, felt her trembling against my chest. Then he's already made his last mistake. Back at the cabin, I barred the doors and checked the windows. The rifle stayed loaded, shells laid out neat on the table. Amanda sat by the hearth, blanket around her shoulders, staring at the fire like it owed her an answer. After a long while, she said, "You can still send me away. You don't have to carry this." I knelt beside her. "I ain't sending you anywhere. This land's as much yours now as mine, and I don't walk away from what I've sworn to keep." She didn't reply, but her hand found mine. Her grip was firm, and in that moment, I knew something had changed. Fear still lived in her, sure, but it wasn't the only thing anymore. There was something else taking root, and I reckon Silas had no idea what kind of fire he just lit. Morning came pale and heavy, clouds hanging low like smoke that never left the sky. I hadn't slept much. Spent most of the night sitting by the window, watching the horizon for movement. The rifle leaned against my knee. Coffee long gone cold. Amanda moved quiet around me, packing a small satchel, hand steady though her face was drawn tight. She'd stopped shaking. That was the first thing I noticed. The fear was still there, but she learned how to stand up inside it. I reckon that's a kind of courage most folks never understand. "You really think he'll come back here, Osh?" she asked. "He didn't light that fire to scare the Millers. I said he wanted you to see it. He's drawing you out." Her eyes flicked toward the field. The chrysanthemums swayed slow in the wind, bright against the ash-dark soil. "Then he knows where to hurt me." I stood, slid the rifle strap over my shoulder. Let him try. We spent the day fortifying the place, stacking logs, laying extra water by the door, moving what mattered most to the cellar. She worked beside me, sleeves rolled, dirt on her cheeks. Every time I told her to rest, she shook her head. "I'm done sitting still," she said. By sundown, we were ready as two souls could be. The sky burned orange, then bled to red, and I caught her staring out the window, lips moving like she was praying. Maybe she was. When night fell, I told her to stay inside no matter what. She nodded, but didn't promise. I knew that kind of silence. It meant she'd already made her own plan. The hours crawled, the wind died, and even the coyotes held their tongues. Somewhere deep in the dark, the horses started snorting and pawing the ground. My gut turned to lead. Then came the sound. Boots on gravel, slow and steady. I stepped out onto the porch. Rifle raised. "Silas," I said. My voice came out low even. "You picked a bad night." He stepped out from behind the barn, lantern swinging from one hand. The light caught his face, slick with sweat and soot. "You make it sound like I had a choice," he said. "You took what's mine." "She ain't yours," I said. He smiled, teeth glinting in the lamplight. "Funny, she said the same once, before she burned my life down." I took a step closer. "You earned that burn, I figure." He laughed, the kind of laugh that comes from a hollow place. "You think she told you the truth? You think she's the victim here?" Behind me, the door creaked. "Wade," Amanda whispered. "Oh, don't." But I didn't look back. I kept my eyes on him. "You came a long way just to talk." "Oh, I came to do more than talk," he said, drawing the revolver from his belt. Everything slowed then, the sound of metal clicking, the rush of wind through dry grass, the steady thump of my heartbeat. I fired first. The muzzle flash lit the yard like lightning, and he stumbled back, lantern crashing to the dirt. Flames leapt high where the oil spilled, catching the edge of the barn. I ran forward, but he lunged too, wild and desperate. We hit the ground hard, rolling through dust and sparks. His breath smelled of whiskey and hate. He swung first. I caught his wrist, twisted, felt the bone give with a crack. His gun dropped, but he still had the knife. The fire roared beside us, heat biting our faces. "Should have left her to burn," he hissed. I slammed my forearm across his throat, stars bursting behind my eyes. "You first," I growled. Amanda's voice cut through the roar. "Wade." I turned just enough to see her standing near the porch, rifle aimed, steady as stone. For a second I thought she'd freeze, but she didn't. The shot rang out clean and sharp. Silas went still. The knife slipped from his hand, clattering against the stones. I shoved him off and staggered back, chest heaving. The fire snapped and spit beside us, light flickering across his lifeless face. Amanda dropped the rifle, hand shaking now that it was done. I went to her, pulling her close. She pressed her forehead to my chest, breath coming fast. "I killed him," she said. "You ended it," I said, "and there's a difference." We stood there till the fire started crawling toward the fence. Then I pulled her away, both of us coughing from the smoke. By dawn, the barn was gone, nothing but black beams and ash left. We buried him on the far side of the ridge. No marker, no words, just the sound of the shovel hitting hard earth. When it was done, she stood looking down a long while. "I thought I'd feel free," she said, "but I just feel empty." "Freedom don't come clean," I said. "Well, it takes time to fit right." We rode back in silence, the sun coming up behind us. At the house, the chrysanthemums were bent low, covered in soot but still standing. She touched one, brushed the ash away. "They'll grow again," she whispered. "Yeah," I said. "And so will we." That night, the house felt different. Not lighter, just quieter, like the world was exhaling after holding its breath too long. I sat by the hearth, Amanda across from me, her hair loose and tangled. She looked up once, met my eyes, and for the first time since she arrived, there wasn't fear looking back. There was only life. For a long time after that night, the land seemed to hold its breath. The wind came easy, the sky wide and quiet, the kind of stillness that don't quite trust itself. I'd walk out to the ridge some mornings, just to see the spot where we laid him down. The dirt had settled, weeds starting to crawl back over it. I didn't feel no victory, just a slow, tired peace, the kind a man earns when he's done what had to be done. Amanda didn't speak of it much. She moved through the days like she was learning the world all over again. She kept busy, mending, cleaning, cooking, tending the patch of flowers that somehow survived the fire. She said little, but when she did, her voice had changed. Softer, steadier, like the tremor had finally left her bones. Sometimes I'd catch her outside just before dawn, standing barefoot in the grass, eyes closed, breathing the cold air. I never disturbed her. That was her way of remembering she was still alive. As for me, I went back to ranch work. Slow at first, then as the rhythm came back, there's a kind of mercy in routine. The animals don't care what you've done or who you've killed. They just need feeding, mending, a steady hand. Some days that was enough to keep me from thinking too much. Weeks passed. The smell of smoke faded from the boards, replaced by pine oil and coffee. The chrysanthemums bloomed again, bright and defiant, pushing through the black soil like small suns. Amanda tended them every morning. When she came inside, her fingers smelled of earth and new beginnings. One evening, I was working in the barn when she stepped in, her dress dusted with pollen. "You're fixing that saddle again?" she asked, leaning on the doorframe. "Old leather's like old bones," I said. "Cracks if you don't keep it oiled." She smiled faint. "Maybe that's true for people, too." She took a few steps closer, light from the lantern spilling over her face. I saw how the months had changed her. The hollows in her cheeks filled out. The lines at the corners of her eyes softened. She wasn't the ghost who stepped off that wagon anymore. She was something real. Flesh and fire and quiet strength. "You ever think about leaving?" she asked suddenly. "Leaving where?" "This place. This life. Starting fresh somewhere that doesn't smell like ash." I set the saddle down slow. I thought about it. Then I figured I already did start fresh. Just didn't have to move to do it. She looked down, thumb rubbing the edge of her apron. "I don't know who I am anymore without fear following close behind." "You're who you were always meant to be," I said. "Fear just ain't driving the wagon no more." She didn't answer, but the way she looked at me told me she wanted to believe it. She left soon after, the sound of her steps soft on the dirt. I sat there a while longer, watching the lantern flame dance in the still air. That night, it rained. The first real rain in months. The roof hummed under it, steady and calm. I lay awake listening to the drops hit the window, thinking how strange it was that water and fire both sound like forgiveness. When you've lived through enough of them, near midnight, I heard the creak of floorboards. Amanda's shadow filled the doorway. She held her blanket close around her shoulders. "I couldn't sleep," she said. "Neither could I told her. She stood there a long moment, then crossed the room and sat near the hearth. The fire was low, coals breathing red. I poured her some coffee from the pot I'd left warm and handed it to her. She took it with both hands, eyes on the flames. "Do you ever wonder why we survive?" she asked. "All the damn time." "Maybe it wasn't luck," she said. "Maybe it was mercy." "Maybe," I said. Or maybe the world just ain't done with us yet. She smiled at that, a small, tired curve of her lips. I could live with that. When she finished her coffee, she didn't go back to her room. She stayed by the fire, head resting against the chair, eyes drifting shut. I watched her a long while, the kind of look a man don't plan, just falls into. The rain kept falling, soft as breath. I sat back, letting the weight of the night settle on me. It wasn't love yet, not the kind you name out loud, but it was close, like the first tremor of thunder before the storm. By morning, the air was clear, the whole world rinsed clean. The land looked new again, like it had forgiven us for what we'd done. Amanda stepped outside, sunlight on her hair, and for the first time, she smiled without flinching. It wasn't a big smile, just a quiet one, the kind that belongs to folks who've come back from hell and found something worth staying for. And I reckon that was enough. The rain left the earth soft, and for a few days, the air smelled like new life. Every morning I'd find Amanda in the garden, sleeves rolled, knees damp with mud, humming that tune she'd carried since the start. It wasn't any song I knew, but it had the sound of something old and kind. I'd watch her from the porch, coffee in hand, thinking maybe heaven wasn't a place after all. Maybe it was just the feel of breathing easy beside someone who'd seen what you've seen and stayed anyway. I still rode out most days, checking the herd, fixing what needed fixing. Routine has a way of mending the mind, but each time I crested the ridge, I looked down at that patch of earth where we buried Silas. Grass was coming in strong now, swallowing the mound. Time's mercy, I guess. You can't hold on to hate when the world keeps growing over it. Amanda had taken to keeping a ledger by the window. Notes about the weather, the cattle, when the flowers bloomed. Sometimes I'd see a page open, her handwriting small and careful. She'd written words like, "Today I wasn't afraid," or "The air smelled like rain, not smoke." Little things, but they mattered. She was learning to live forward. One evening after supper, we sat outside on the porch. The sky was stretching out, wide and red, a handful of stars just starting to wake. She leaned against the railing, her hands wrapped around a tin cup of coffee gone cold. "You ever miss who you were before the war?" she asked. I thought a while before answering. "Sometimes, but I don't reckon I was much of a man worth missing back then. Angry, lost, too sure of what I didn't understand." She looked at me, and now I just try to keep the fence mended and the coffee strong. That got her to laugh, a soft sound that caught me off guard. "Maybe that's all a person needs," she said. "Not maybe," I said. "You fix what's broke, feed what's hungry, and try not to lose your temper when the rain don't come." The light faded slow, and she stayed quiet for a spell. Then she said, "I want to leave him there. I mean truly leave him. No more fear, no more remembering every time the wind shifts." "You can," I told her, "but you don't gotta forget to move on. You just gotta stop letting him drive your days." She nodded, eyes on the horizon. "Then maybe I'll write it down one last time. That way it's his story that stays on the page, not in my head." "That's a good way to bury a man twice," I said. That night, she wrote late. I could hear the scratch of her pen long after I'd gone to bed. When I woke, the notebook sat closed on the table beside my coffee pot, a small chrysanthemum pressed between the pages. She left a note tucked under it. "He can't find me anymore. I didn't touch the book. It wasn't mine to read, but I kept it there all the same, like proof of a promise. The weeks stretched into summer. The sky turned hard and bright, the kind that makes the air shimmer. Work was steady, simple. She'd take the wagon into town once a week, trade eggs and milk for sugar, cloth, sometimes a few books. Folks in Dry Ridge got used to seeing her, though they still called her Mrs. Langston, even if neither of us had said vows proper. One day she came back with a parcel wrapped in brown paper. "Close your eyes," she said, smiling a little. I did, though I'm not the kind for surprises. When I opened them, she was holding out a pair of gloves, soft, fine leather, better than anything I'd have bought myself. "They'll keep your hands from cracking," she said. "You've done enough bleeding for one lifetime." I swallowed hard. "There's something, Amanda," she shrugged. "Call it thanks, or maybe just kindness returned." I wore them the next day. The feel of them reminded me that not every mark on a man has to come from pain. That evening, she joined me by the corral. The air was thick with the smell of dust and horses. She watched the sun sink behind the ridge, gold bleeding into blue. "You ever think about what comes next?" she asked. "Tomorrow's fence," I said. She smiled. "No, I mean, after all this, when the years pile up and we're just memories in someone else's story." I looked out across the plains. If we're lucky, someone will remember that we tried to be good. That's enough for me. She nodded slow. "Then that's what I'll write." The wind picked up then, rustling the grass, lifting her hair. The smell of wild sage rolled through the air, and she laughed quiet. "Smells like rain again." "Maybe it's just the world telling us it's done testing us for a while," I said. She looked at me with that same calm she learned the hard way. "You think it ever ends, Wade? The fighting, the losing, the starting over?" "No," I said, "but maybe that's the trick of living. You don't wait for the peace. You build it right where you're standing." She reached for my hand then, fingers lacing through mine. We sat there in the near dark, the earth humming under us, the stars coming slow. And for once, I didn't think about tomorrow, or the ghost that came before. I just breathed, same as her. We stayed that way till the moon climbed high. The night air was cool, soft. She leaned her head on my shoulder, and I thought, maybe this is what redemption sounds like. Not words, not prayers, just the quiet of two hearts learning to rest. By the time summer settled full on the plains, the land around Dry Ridge had turned the color of old whiskey. Dust rode every gust of wind, clinging to skin and breath alike, but there was life in it. Amanda's garden bloomed fierce despite the heat, and each morning she'd be out early, wide hat shadowing her eyes, humming low. Sometimes she'd wave me off with a grin when I lingered too long at the fence. "Go tend your fences, Wade," she'd call. "I've got my own patch to protect." I reckon she did. The cabin had changed with her. It smelled less of smoke now, more of coffee, bread, and them flowers she'd learned to grow. The old walls, once bare, had small things hung up. Her shawl, a photograph of my folks, a horseshoe polished clean. Little markers of a life rebuilt. Some nights, we'd sit on the porch, saying nothing for hours. The world didn't need talking over when it was this still. Out past the ridge, coyotes yipped, and every now and then a whip-poor-will cut through the quiet. I'd pour us both a cup of coffee, and she'd rest her hands round it, letting the warmth sink into her. "You ever think," she said one of those nights, "about how strange it is we ended up here? Two ghosts who were supposed to be gone by now." "I think on it plenty," I said, "and it seems to me the Lord's got a sense of humor." She smiled at that, slow and easy. "Maybe he does." The days found their rhythm. We'd ride out together sometimes, not speaking, just letting the land roll by beneath us. She was good on a horse, always had been, but now she rode like she trusted the ground again. Her laugh came easier, too, though she didn't waste it. When it came, it carried across the fields like church bells on Sunday. Late August brought the harvest moon, big and red over the horizon. We'd finished mending the south fence and spent the evening on the porch. The sky spread wide and endless. Amanda brought out that old notebook of hers. It was worn near to falling apart, edges frayed, pages yellowing. "I've been writing again," she said. I figured, I told her. "You always get that faraway look when the words start knocking." She smiled, ran her thumb along the spine. "It started as a way to forget, but now I think it's how I remember without hurting." "You planning to keep at it?" She nodded. "Maybe I'll write about this place, about you, about what it means to stay when leaving might be easier." I chuckled. "That'll make a short story." She gave me that look, the one that says she's already 2 steps ahead. "No, Wade, it'll make a good one." She went quiet after that, eyes on the moon. I watched her face in that silver light and thought how far we'd both come. A man don't get many second chances. Not out here. When they come, you take 'em gentle and hold on. That night, before heading in, she plucked a chrysanthemum from the garden and set it in a jar by the window. "For your mother," she said. "She'd have liked you," I told her. "I hope so." When we turned in, I lay there listening to her breathe in the next room. The sound was steady, peaceful, the kind of sound that tells a man he's done something right with what little life gave him. Autumn crept in slow. The mornings came cool again, the air sharp with promise. We took to walking after supper down by the creek where the willows bowed low. One evening she stopped and looked up at me, eyes bright beneath the fading light. "I never thanked you proper," she said. "For what?" "For staying." I shook my head. "Wasn't me did the staying. You could have run plenty of times. You're the one who chose to build something here." She stepped closer then, so close I could smell the lilac soap she favored. "Then maybe we both did." I didn't say much after that. Some truths don't need words. They settle quiet between two people and take root, like seed in spring soil. Winter came soon after, bringing its hush. We spent the cold months inside mostly, working, mending, waiting out the wind. She kept writing. I kept building. When the first snow melted, the ground drank deep, and new shoots rose again from the black earth. Life has a way of starting over when you least expect it. Sometimes I still dream of that first day. The wagon, the dust, her eyes full of fear. But in the dream now, she's stepping down into light, not shadow. And I'm there waiting, not to save her, but to walk beside her. She ain't my ghost anymore. She's my home. And out here, under this wide and lonesome sky, that's all a man ever needs.